So this month, Labour activists, MPs and various trade unionists will be meeting for Labour's annual National Policy Forum. Keir Starmer's party is riding high in the polls, but a lot of people are asking, what policies are we going to get if a Labour government actually materialises? I mean, there's been, a lack of detail, certainly, from the leadership. There's been rows over everything from tuition fees to green policy to the economy. Rachel Reeves last week said that the next Labour government will probably stick to the Conservative spending plans. So, is this... are we unclear as to what Keir Starmer stands for, and is that a problem, Paul?
Oh, it's all so encouraging, isn't it? I mean, there's an absence of radicalism, there's an absence of ideology, not just within the Labour Party, I think across politics generally, actually. I mean, I suspect what might happen is we might see something like what happened in the most recent Australian election where the Labour Party won it, but not because they really inspired anyone, just because they were seen as the worst of a bad bunch and they kind of got over the line that way. And I suspect at the next election that could be something that might happen in Britain. And talking about, the absence of ideology, I was reading only this morning, actually, an account of the 1976 sterling crisis in Britain under the Jim Callaghan government, when the Labour government went cap in hand, as the saying goes, to the IMF to get a loan. And when you read the accounts of what happened in that Labour cabinet, there were some real heavyweights in that cabinet. Yeah. The likes of Tony Benn on the left, who were arguing for a particular an alternative economic strategy. You had Healey on the right, who was arguing we've got to capitulate to the IMF and please the markets. You had people like Tony Crossland, intellectuals and whatever. He was kind of in the middle between the two. And there were regular cabinet meetings, and this is all documented, where they were really thrashing out those ideas, radical ideas in many respects, and having those big kind of set-piece contentious debates. And I honestly can't really imagine anything like that taking place in the Labour Party today. I cannot imagine people in the Labour Party, it's my party, but I can't imagine people in the front bench of the Labour Party sitting around the shadow cabinet saying, right, we've got a big cost of living crisis going on at the moment. We've got a listless economy. We've got no growth. We've got we're on the brink of a recession. We've got interest rates going up. We've got people struggling to pay their mortgages. We've got a threat of a recession and unemployment and businesses closing and repossessions and all the rest of it. How do we get out of that? What do we do as a country to grow our economy at the same time as protecting working class people? How do we make our economy more productive? How do we make it more competitive? What are the ideas? Instead of which, what they tend to do, as far as I can see, is say, well, the markets know best. Yeah. These people are the real experts. Within business are the real experts. Yeah, we can do a little bit, on welfare payments and a little bit around tax and stuff like that. But in terms of macroeconomic ideas, we've got no idea about that. Let the Bank of England decide interest rates. We're not really capable of doing that. Let's not ever challenge the financial markets in the City of London. They're too important. And the whole thing really is pretty depressing, to be honest. And there doesn't seem to me to be any particular party or any group of politicians who have got that kind of ideological heft and spark to be able to say, we need a radical change in this country. There's very, very few people in the Labour Party who I think have got that ability. Most of them would be happy just to give power to the EU, give power to the Bank of England, let them decide everything. So yeah, quite depressing.
Just to make it even more depressing, it's not only that Labour is not having these great internal debates, they're not even having a debate with the Tories about the state of the economy, about many of the sort of most important policies. Yeah. There's some disagreement over whether women can have penises, whether it's 9% that don't, or 1 or 100%, but that's about it.
That's as far as we get. No, it is striking how on the one hand you have, if you're a Labour shadow cabinet and your response to the economic situation the country finds itself in and the economic stewardship that the Tories are offering is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we should just shuffle some of the money around here or there. And if you want to do new spending, as Rachel Reeves has said to various colleagues, you need to find it from inside your own department. I mean, everything is so much about kind of shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic whilst it goes down, it feels like. But I think Paul's point about the stature of politicians is so striking. it's worth saying it's not just in the Labour Party either. It's a sort of den of pygmies, Westminster, really, these days, with some noble exceptions. And you think, whilst, Starmer's cabinet, shadow cabinet, certainly is dwarfed by, if you compare them to likes of Crosland or Ben or Healy or whatever. But even the kind of Tony Blair comparisons don't really stack up. I'd loathe Tony Blair and what that government did in many respects quite passionately. But at the same time, he had a project of sorts, whether it was in terms of turning the Labour Party against what it was traditionally there to do. We could talk about Iraq, we could talk about all kinds of other things. But he had something about him, at least in comparison to Keir Starmer, who seems to be a sort of triangulation of a triangulator. He's several kind of iterations along of a sort of managerial politician who is surrounded by people who are equally unimpressive. And there's also the kind of discussion that happens internally within Labour about the leadership's very hard line with anyone who's kind of pushing back against their agenda, hard line with the left, kicking Jeremy Corbyn out of the Labour Party and so on, all of which I agree has been very anti-democratic. But you also think you're doing this against the left, which is similarly unimpressive and unthreatening. If the Socialist Campaign Group chaired by Richard Bergen or whoever else it is at this point is the biggest thing you've got to worry about, then surely think you haven't got that much to worry about, really. So it just feels like on all sides of the Labour discussion, but also Westminster in general, really, you've just got different flavours of managerialists and a kind of few faux radicals who just make a bit of noise from time to time. The lack of substance, the lack of politics, really, to it has been really, really striking, particularly going into, as you say, the closer we get to the election, the more it feels like Labour's bluff is being called. What is it that you actually want to do? Yeah. And the answer being Jeremy Hunt, but with a smile. It doesn't really work, does it?
And it is striking the U-turns, just because there's been so many. Obviously, politicians make U-turns all the time, but Starmer has become an expert on it. Only a few weeks ago, he was trailing his plans, exciting plans for oil-free Britain. Now he's going around saying, "I hate tree huggers." It's always like night and day difference. He can't even he can't take two positions and find a middle one. Even he has to go for the complete opposite of the thing he said a few weeks ago.
I think there's a danger that if as a politician, especially in this day and age where everyone's got access to clips on social media and whatever, where you are repeatedly seen as saying one thing at one moment in time because you think it's going to get you the leadership or whatever, and then 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, you say the complete opposite. I mean, all politicians do that to a certain degree, and they get away with it to a certain degree. But if you're seen to do it on pretty much everything, then the danger is people just kind of say, well, we can't trust you really because, you just lied to get the leadership. And why would you not do anything? Why would you not do the same when you actually, or if you get into number 10 Downing Street? I think Kinnock had that problem. Actually, when you think of Kinnock, he came from the left, he came from the radical left within the Labour Party. A boy from the South Wales valleys and was always associated with the left. And then when he became leader in the 1980s and moved to the right on many questions, nuclear weapons and so on, in the end, people felt, well, we can't really trust because you're just doing this because you want to gain power. And in the end, I think the public kind of like people with a bit of integrity, even if they don't necessarily agree with them. If you're somebody who goes out there and argues your case and fights your corner and takes on all comers and says, look, whatever stick I'm going to get, this is what I believe, and you might disagree with me, but I'm going to argue for it anyway, take me as I am. I think in the end, people have a bit of respect for that, and they prefer that to someone who just tries to be on message the whole time and tries to please everybody and tries to avoid saying anything controversial. But I do, I go back to the discussion that we've had before. I do think we are desperate in this country for ideas, for radicalism, for the return of ideology. How do we revitalise our industry? How do we reinvigorate the real economy and move away from reliance on financial services? How do we deal with some of the big cultural issues that are facing us at the moment? Where there is this massive disconnect between the political and cultural elites on some of the fundamental questions and ordinary people out there in mainstream Britain. Nobody on the left, I don't think, and as has been said across politics, mainstream politics generally, seems to have any of the answers to that stuff.